Well, this kind of marks the halfway point in my time with you. And we've got a good part of the meat of the book in front of us. As I said the first week that I was here, that I think that there's a part of this book that has to do with the type of that represents what Naomi is. I think she represents Israel. I think Ruth represents the Gentiles, and Boaz is a type of Jesus. And I said then that there's trepidation on my part to talk about that, because there's lots of ways for that to be misunderstood, or for someone to, perhaps have their feelings hurt. That is never the point. I've been going to this church for 33 years, and when I first came here, it was a grace-based church that had some works theology in it. It's changed a terrific amount in those 33 years. Where I grew up in rural Oklahoma is still a works-based theology, and so we have some things then that as a church, not just this church, but as the church, issues that help us to grow and help us to understand more about God's plan. And I think that what we don't talk very much about Israel, we don't talk very much about God's plan for Israel, and so today I will talk some about that, but I want to say again up front that nothing that I think is that important, but it's having the discussion that is the most important. So, I haven't been able to get rid of this raspy voice, so we'll have to deal with that again, and I'll have to have some drinks of water as we go. Last week we kind of got to about the last part of chapter 2, and we ran out of time, and I kind of just brushed across it quickly. I want to go back and hit a few verses from chapter 2 before we go to 3. And the good news is that chapter 3 is only 18 verses long, and it's the shortest of the book, so maybe we'll make it come out even. Last week we talked about God's rewards, and that was where Boaz, in one of his speeches to Ruth, had said, "May God reward you." And it's in verse 12, may the Lord reward your work and your wages be paid full from the Lord. I think that it's worth to stop here for just a minute and ask ourselves, what are we really talking about? Did God owe her anything? Well, no. But God uses a reward system to maintain order in this world. He rewards good and evil actions. So while I think that we don't necessarily have to believe that God owes us anything, I think that I believe that God rewards those who diligently seek Him. I think that God rewards those people who have that hesedness about them, the true covenant relationship, where salvation has something to do with what? It has something to do with love thy neighbor as thyself. Put somebody else before yourself. It has something to do with love the Lord your God with all your heart, might, strength, and soul. So these are those things that I think God rewards in this life and the life to come. But one of the things that I did was I did a search for the words recompense, reward, and reimburse. And I found that recompense is used 26 times, reward is used 68 times, rewards, in the plural, 6 times, and reimburse once. And so there's definitely, God has something to say about us expecting a reward. In fact, one of the verses that I pondered on at great length is 2 Samuel 7:25, where David screams out, I think he screams out, God, now do as you say you will. I think God expects us to expect Him to perform and to do those things that He has promised. In verse 14, one of the things that I thought we maybe passed by just a little bit too quickly was that there was more than enough for Ruth to eat. There was more than enough to fill and satisfy her, and she had some leftovers. So when we think about that, and then we think about what she did with those leftovers, they were still fresh. She took those and shared them with someone else. And I think that it was a symbol of a communion meal. I believe that we pass by the meaning of communion sometimes a little bit too quickly, and so I'll just touch on that again this morning. One of the verses of the Bible is Proverbs 3:26 that I ponder upon a great deal, which is to acknowledge the Lord in all your ways. How do we really do that? If we do that, were you thankful that you didn't have a wreck coming here this morning? We often pray for travel safety, but just a simple commute from home, is that something that's one of acknowledging God in all of our ways? Simple things should be, and having just enough of a meal left over, I think is a way that I hope that Ruth and Naomi were able to acknowledge God. Now, in verse 15, I think there's some interesting stuff that I passed by too quickly. When she rose to glean, Boaz commanded his servant, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not insult her." Then in verse 16, "Also purposely pull out for her some grain from the bundles and leave it, that she may glean, and do not rebuke her." Well, she's working. She believes that she is working as hard as she's supposed to. Just because our path is made a little easier doesn't necessarily mean we aren't doing our part. So we see the providences of God, I believe, in the way that Boaz is treating Ruth, because he's made it easier for her to be successful. Is there anything wrong with that? He was.
Work.
And he told the rest of the people who were out there not to insult her. Well, I think that I see from that Matthew 11:30 is at play here. Because if Boaz is a type for Jesus, then he is making his yoke easy and her burden light. He's made her path straighter. He's been a lamp unto her feet. But she appreciates that because she works all day. She doesn't cut the corner. She doesn't go home early. She's still working all day, and she threshes what her gleanings were before she went home. Once again, taking nothing for granted. In verse 19, she goes home, and her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? May he who took notice of you be blessed." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz." I think this verse is interesting because Naomi is blessing the landowner before she knows who he is. She said, "May this man be blessed." Are we that way? Will we pray for any or all of our benefactors even if we don't know their names? There are people who do things for us on a daily basis. Maybe we don't even stop to consider, much less acknowledging God in front of us. I think that's an important part of what we needed to do. And do we need to, I put on here on this slide, does this include Israel? And who is Israel? Are we talking about, yes, Paul? Okay. Okay. You want to say anything else? They got a mic for you.
Yeah, but our circumcision is circumcision of the heart. And so we are what God contemplated when He created Israel. We're following the ultimate Jew, which is Jesus Christ. Now, I think there is a special place for Israel, but to put Israel in a class with us, physical Israel in a class with us, I think is mistaken. We are the true Israel. We are what He planned when He created Israel.
Any comments on that? Man, wait for the mic if you don't mind.
I know that he put blinders on Israel, and there's still promises that He would include Israel. We're specifically linked to them, and we are included if we're in Christ. You know, only in Christ do we gain inheritance into that. Now, in the end times, it's coming that He'll take those blinders off, and that a remnant will still be saved. And so there's still, yes, we're, and I do agree, it's circumcision of the heart, like we're saying, and so we are partakers, but they shall be grafted back in, as it says.
That's right. If they follow Christ, they get grafted back in.
Right, and it says that there will be that remnant that does, but between then and way back when, they can't be good enough. They don't have Christ. They're like everybody else out there under the law, and the law does one thing: it convicts, it condemns. And that's about it.
Okay. Well, okay, there's another. Okay.
I also think that we owe Israel, the descendants of Abraham, gratitude of those who remained faithful to God and studied the Torah and tried to walk in His ways, because God chose a people, a nation, as the first recipients of His truth, so that it could be more easily spread around the world in a more advantageous way. He used them as an example to us in many things that He did. And so I think in their pursuit of God, even though they didn't come to know Jesus the way we know Him, we have benefited by their lineage, if that makes sense. And I have studied things written by people who claim to be Orthodox Jews, and read their calendar, this calendar that's been passed down from the beginning. And it is so interesting to me when they can say on any special day, today's the day that Moses went up to the mountain to receive the Ten Commandments. And today's the day that Aaron died. So when you get familiar with their calendar, you can come to know even the specific time in this generation when historical events occurred way back at the beginning. And I think that's a great gift.
It is. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, I was going to echo the remarks of the remnant. Today, God always preserves a remnant of the church, whether that be in this body here or in another country. He's always preserving a remnant of His people. And today, there are Messianic Jews who come from the Jewish heritage, but have put on Christ, as their Lord in baptism, and they recognize the same things that you and I do. So God is preserving a remnant among the Israelites as well. And in the last days, I do think there will be a great awakening among the Jewish people.
Good.
Romans 11:25 says, Paul is writing, I want you to understand the secret truth, brothers and sisters. The truth will help you understand that you don't know everything. The truth is this: part of Israel has been made stubborn, but that will change when enough non-Jews have come to God. And that is how all Israel will be saved, as it is written in the Scriptures.
That's excellent. I actually intend to read that a little bit later, but it's good to think about now. Paul wants to make another comment, please.
Yes, I think a lot of people don't realize that most people in Israel are not descendants from Abraham. They're what is known as Ashkenazi Jews. They're from a Khazarian group that was in Turkey. The Jews that are descendants of Abraham are called Sephardic Jews, and they are in a minority in Israel. They don't have the true power in Israel today. The ones that have the true power are not direct descendants from Abraham.
I think that's an important point, because what are we really talking about when we talk about Israel? We're talking about that modern day faction that you're talking about, or are we talking about specifically here somebody who's praying for somebody else that has done something good for them and wishes that the Lord would bless them in return? So as I studied this, my mind was drawn to Ephesians 6:18, where we're to pray for all the saints all the time. So my next question, and we'll get to that because I think Lynn wants to make a comment here, so please go ahead, Lynn.
Well, the point is that Israel has always been identified by whether or not they had faith, regardless of their heritage, who they claimed to be related to. And even in Jeremiah chapter 4, it talks about circumcision, because they're about to be attacked again. Circumcise yourselves in the Lord and remove the foreskins from your hearts. So it's right there, it's talking about what they love and where their faith is. Men of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. So remove the foreskins of your heart, men of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, or else my wrath will go forth like fire and burn with none to quench it, because of the evil of your deeds. So it's always been a matter of faith, and always been a matter of whether the hearts were clean to God, and that's how the true Israel has been identified from the beginning,
And so that's the Israel that I think that we need to pray for, because there still exists a remnant that God is saving for himself. All right, Bill, go ahead.
I think sometimes too, when we read the Old Testament, we read the New Testament, we forget that when Jesus came and he did his teachings to his disciples and to everybody about how to treat other people, he wasn't bringing any new message. God had already told the Israelites in the law from the beginning of the nation of Israel how to treat everybody else. But they didn't do a very good job of it. However, we have an example here in the book of Ruth of a man who is following the teachings that Jesus reiterated that God had already given on how to deal with other people. And we have Naomi here doing what God said do, and that is pray for benefactors. Thank God and bless those who bless us. This stuff was never new. We forget that. We look at Jesus and think of all of this new stuff he brought. No, he didn't. He just reiterated what his Father had already told his people they were supposed to be doing, and they didn't. Just like the rest of us here in the world today, people haven't changed a lick. We still don't do what God said do. But Jesus said, here, this is what my dad told you guys to do. Now do it. And here we have an example of two people that are doing it. Actually, three, because Ruth is doing it too.
Okay, one more, Jeff, and then we'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah, he not only reiterated, but he raised the bar. He said, you've heard it said, but I say to you, you've heard it said, you shall not, covet your neighbor's wife. But I say to you, if you have that feeling for her in your heart, you've committed adultery.
This is some fabulous discussion. I had no idea where we would go. And last week, I knew that this was some stuff that I wanted, and you all saw me up there perspiring and wiping my brow because I was so nervous about getting to this topic, and I avoided it last week because I was afraid. And so after a lot of prayer this week, I think those prayers have been answered because we've had what I've hoped to get, which is a roundtable discussion. Yes, Bill?
So you were being anxious.
I needed today's sermon last week. I just didn't have it together. And that's for sure. Remember that religion and politics have caused many an argument that has led to the all-time hard feelings. And so some of this stuff is hard because when is the last time that you've been in a class where you've had this kind of discussion about Israel, about faith, about love your neighbor as yourself? That it's really not all that new. That it's been part of the Old Testament. Now, I think it's great. We're 19 to 20 minutes in, and we need to just move on. We're still in chapter 2. I look at this one here, and Ruth takes all of her stuff home, all of her gleanings home every day. But Naomi is just always there. Well, how old is Naomi? Why is she not working? If she's a type of Israel, is she just too old and she accepts all the blessings as they come? Or what do you think about that? Let's discuss what we think the age of Naomi and possibly Boaz may be.
Boaz isn't over here.
Yes.
Well, we know that Naomi had two sons. We know that they were old enough to have their own wives. So if she had one a year or two after the other one, then and she was 16 or 18 when she got married, then she was at least 38 to 40, something like that, before she and Ruth left to come back home. So she's probably between 40 and 50 years old, just roughly, based on those estimates. Ruth is probably in her early 20s. And Boaz, from the way he talks about himself, he's probably in his 40s too. And obviously he hasn't married because there's no evidence that he's been widowed or anything like that. He doesn't have another wife. So he's been busy building his business and taking care of, and he hadn't found a woman that he wanted.
Okay. I think that's a pretty good discussion about that. I just think we have to kind of set some parameters of how old do we really think these folks were. And it's probably that Naomi was just too old to work. One thought that came to me here about a way to pray for one another is, you remember that Jesus said that the fields were white with the harvest. And Ruth is being blessed by a very big harvest, but at the same time, she's not getting very much help from home. And so I just kicked that around. I couldn't decide if maybe she was too old to be out there working, or maybe she just, was not part of the plan. Because remember, she left full, she comes back empty, and does she get full again before this book is over? She does, but maybe not yet at this point.
I think it says something for Naomi on the fact that Ruth is living with her and chooses to live with her mother-in-law, so there must be something good going on there.
I'm sure there is, Cleveland. Thank you.
I think she's at least past menopause because she refers to herself as the dead,
Yes.
not able to have children.
And I don't have any idea. I did not try to study physiology or the medical thing to see if that changed over, the millennia. Is that something that women go through at the exact same age today? I don't know. I think it's important that we identify all the characters, especially these three characters. What are they doing? How are they doing it? What's their attitude, etc. Okay. We may not get through these 18 verses, but it's good. Okay, verse 1 of chapter 3. Now Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you that it may be well with you?" Boaz hadn't been making any moves. We've been studying him now for at least 6 to 8 weeks. The harvest has been going on. Ruth shows up every day. She works hard. Boaz has been blessing her. He's made some moves, but they're very quiet. They're very much behind the scene. And Naomi is worried now that the harvest has come to an end. I think it's important here to see that while Naomi has been empty, this verse here shows that she has no anxiety for herself. She's only worrying about Ruth, which is a very hesed or covenant, it's a truthful covenant relationship because she's putting someone else before her. There's no mention about Naomi. To this point, has there been any mention about the Levirate law, which is Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10? There's been no discussion to this point between Ruth and Naomi about finding anything but rest. They haven't talked about finding somebody who will redeem the land, which we'll talk a great deal about that next week. But there's been they have just worked together. They've been in a covenant relationship, and Boaz has been blessing them. And now Naomi is becoming, somewhat anxious because the harvest is about to end. Now, I'm just going to go back. There we go. I'm going to read some verses here, 2 through 5. Now, is Boaz not our kinsman with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. It shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down, and then he will tell you what to do. Is this the action of somebody who's desperate? No, it isn't, is it? But do we trust God the way that these two women do? Do we believe at this point that they really, I do, Paul, I think you're on the same wavelength there, they really do trust God, but it doesn't, from the outside, it doesn't look like perhaps that they do.
They only could assess the situation and see that Boaz is taking a shine with her. But maybe Boaz feels has a little loss of confidence or a little self-conscious because he makes mention that you certainly were a catch among the younger men. You have not shown that you want to go towards women. So maybe he didn't feel like he would be somebody that she would want. And I think Naomi just breaks the ice for him.
That pretty much the consensus? Okay. So if we really do trust God, sometimes we just have to ask God for direction and trust that the answer that we get is the right one. And she's getting the answer here that she needs to break the ice. Now I think that the next 4 or 5 verses here are really some, yes, Bill?
Basically, what Naomi did, if we did it in our culture today, she told her daughter-in-law to go ask Boaz on a date. Because that's what she's doing here. She is setting the stage for the very formal type of society that they lived in to let Boaz know that Ruth has interest in him without doing anything wrong. Without doing anything forward or anything that would break a law of God or the law of the Israelites. And in today's society, we would have, mom would have said, daughter, go ask him out on a date, because girls can do that today.
Man.
And in addition to that, for the obligation of the Goel, for the, to cover the family, the lineage, so that it wouldn't go extinct, so that there would be a covering. So there was that obligation there as well that she was trying to get, and she was being led by the hand of the Lord.
She really doesn't tell him to do anything except just to lie down. She doesn't say lie down next to him, lie down on him. It doesn't say anything about taking off any of her clothes. And also, did they not have a tradition of when they were winnowing that they had a big feast? Was this not the night of that feast? There was a lot of the other workers that were around there. So it's it's not like that she just showed up down there and he's the only one. At least I believe that would be how this story would have been if we were eyewitnesses to it. Bill?
Well, I agree with what everyone's saying here, but I just thought I would throw another wrench into the works, kind of mess it up just a little bit.
Good.
We don't know what Boaz's thinking was, and just, maybe he was lacking a little bit of confidence. Maybe he thought, well, I'm just too old for this woman. But then he may have, this may have been an answer from God. He may have talked to God about it and say, wow, I'm really interested in this woman, but and just put it out there for God and say, hey, listen, if this is what you want from me, then you take over and show me. And so that might have been what happened there too. I've been through all kinds of things in my life where I don't know, I'm not sure. Lord, open up the door for me if that's where you want me to go. And behold, that door's either open or closed, and it's pretty plain.
I think it's interesting that by the time that we get to verse 8, it's the middle of the night, and he's startled. Now here's a guy that's worked real hard. He's eaten a big meal. He's drank some wine. He's at the height of his game in so many ways. He's got work that satisfies him. The harvest is a good one. God wakes him up. He's not just startled. God either sent an animal to wake him up, or because his feet were uncovered, he got cold, but he's startled and he wakes up, and it's the providence of God that he does. And so he asks who's there, and in verse 9, Ruth says, I am Ruth, your maid, so spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative. In verse 10, then he said, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first, by not going after young men, whether rich or poor. I think that, probably ought to click my slide here, I might be gaining on it. The first thing thing he says to her is, may you be blessed of the Lord. He doesn't rebuke her. He's happy that she has showed up. I talked to you last week, I think that in verse 2, chapter 2, verse 11, he was telling her then that I'm noticing you and that you are a very attractive, lovely woman. And I think he's been telling her that since he made it easy for her to glean. He's helped her in every which way. He drew water for her. He gave her protection. He had the first workplace anti-harassment policy. He kept everybody from getting on her case. He is in love with her. I don't think there's any doubt. And when she's there, he's happy. So, what is, yes?
I'd like to talk for the mother-in-law.
Please.
I'd just like to say a little bit more in behalf of Naomi.
Yes.
She came back because things had gone very, very poorly, but she came back with a real blessing and a treasure in Ruth. Somebody who just trusted her and wanted to be with her. And Naomi wasn't just sitting at home, she was watching what went on. And I think that shows that she was watching to see what God would do, that she was aware that God was moving because he was blessing Ruth every day, and Naomi acted surprised and pleased every time Ruth brought these good things home. And then when she found out who it was, she was like, Boaz, this is not a coincidence. And Ruth did not know how everything worked in that society. Naomi did, and Naomi was wise, and she counseled her wisely. So I think we need to give Naomi a little more credit.
Let's give Naomi some credit. She truthfully has had Ruth's best interests at heart from the time that Ruth committed to her. And I don't have any doubt that Naomi was a good Jewish woman, a good Israelite woman in her own right. So let's do give her some credit. She deserves it. Just because she represents Israel does not necessarily mean that she is out of covenant. In verse 10. All right, Glenn. Glenn and Kevin.
It's not, she recognized how the covenant works. That's part of what's going on there. It's not just, he's a close relative, he's a redeemer relative. He is a relative who can restructure the family and give us the inheritance, an inheritance, give us a family, plug us back in to what was here before. So she understood very well how things worked, and Ruth didn't know that yet, but she gave her the words. Go tell him when he is a redeemer. She already said here he's a redeemer relative. He is someone who can bring us back, and that's how Ruth identified him, and he agreed. So there's a lot going on there, but it's like understanding the system, and the system here was to make a family whole.
Kevin?
Yes, to go along with that, if we're paralleling this with Israel and the Gentiles and Boaz with Christ and the whole salvation issue, some of the things I'm seeing is Naomi being the true Israel, the ones, the first Christians were Jews, and they were seeing the Christ for who he was, and she wasn't really looking at the time that she recognized Boaz as a redeemer after Ruth comes back. And Ruth went to Boaz. Boaz made himself available, presented himself, let her know who he was, like Christ does with us. He invites us, and we need to respond and come to him, and that's what she did. And this was not just asking a date, this was asking for marriage. When her response was, "You're my redeemer, redeem me," and so just some things that go along with that.
Yes. Let's look then a little bit more at verse 10. I'm reading out the New American Standard, And there's no stop in this sentence. I believe the NIV has a colon. Now, I don't know if any other version does or not, but it says, you have shown your last kindness to be better than your first. Stop by not going after young men, whether rich or poor. What was the first kindness? It was partnering with Naomi. And what is she really saying here to Boaz? Naomi's part of the deal. That's the last kindness that Boaz is talking about. We want you to redeem us. Now the second part of this, where he tells her, by not going after young men, whether rich or poor, I think that's free will. She had the choice. She was an attractive woman. I feel certain that she was spoken to. She was, probably asked, how you doing? And probably there was a move or two thrown her way. She never paid it any attention, because her free will choice was to accept Boaz, to wait for Boaz. I think that's what verse 10 is telling us. Now look closely at verse 11. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do whatever you ask. Now, look back at find it now. Oh, here it is, verse 4. Naomi tells him, when you uncover his feet, lie down, and then he will tell you what you shall do. The roles have completely reversed. At this point, Boaz is going to do whatever she asks. I think that a part of that is because what did Naomi tell her to do? Ruth said in verse 5, all that you say I will do. And then she does. She's obedient. Last week we talked about, or at least it's important to me, and I gave you a verse from Genesis 13:8 that I have always used as a sort of a bell cow, that God told Abram to move his tent, and he did. And he moved it where God told him, which was by the trees at Mamre at Hebron, and then he built the altar and sacrificed. You probably remember that verse. Obedience is better than sacrifice. And so Naomi and Ruth have such a relationship that's so close. Ruth trusts Naomi completely. She obeys completely. And now the roles have been completely reversed because of free will. No man can come to Jesus unless he be called by the Father. But what must happen after that? You must be born again. And so I believe that that's exactly what Boaz is saying here, is that I see that you have become the exact woman that I am supposed to marry, and I'll do whatever you say. There's a lot that has gone on here, and I think that it's a terrific example of much biblical example. I don't know what else to say. I just think there's much going on here, that it's not just a little 4-chapter love story. Finish up in verse 11. For all the people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence. Now it is true, I am a close relative. However, there is a relative that is closer than I. How do you think that Ruth felt when Boaz made that statement? I bet her heart skipped a beat. She's now, oh yeah, she's going to become anxious. So I think that we'll just read on here. So he tells her then in verse 13, remain this night, and when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you, as the Lord lives. Lie down until the morning. So there's a chance that somebody else may step in. And it is the Levirate law that Boaz has to see if the closer redeemer wants to do it. But he tells her that he gives her an oath, as the Lord lives, you're going to get redeemed. I'm going to see to it that you are taken care of. Now, at this point, we're still not talking about the land. We're still really just talking about rest and protection, privilege for Ruth and Naomi. He tells her to lie down. I think that comforts her. And then in verse 14, so she lay at his feet until morning rose, before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. I think he's just telling her that simply because he wants to protect both of them's reputation. There's nothing has happened. No one needs to know it, but he's going to protect her once again. And then in verse 15, he says, give me the cloak that is on you and hold it. So she held it and measured out 6 measures of barley and laid it on her. And then she went to the city. Every time that I see in the Bible something like a count of 6 measures or so much of this or so a distance or so much time, I always ask myself, why did the Bible tell us there were 6 measures? Does anybody know? Does anybody have a guess? I'm not sure that I do, but I think it means something. Paul?
I think the number 6 was prominent in the Old Testament. Number 7 takes some more prominence in the New Testament. There's numerology involved in that a little bit. Number 7 and number 12 indicate completion. Number 6 is not quite there.
It's a lack of completeness of man. That was my best guess.
6 was man's.
Go ahead, Bill.
Being the practical person that I am, I don't count the numbers so much as I look at how much he actually gave her in terms of weight and size. And I think he just gave her as much as she could carry in the cloak.
Good answer. I can't find a reason to disagree with it. But we do know that he did give her something. And he tells her that he's going to go into the city, she's going to go into the city. So we get to verse 16. When she came to her mother-in-law, she said, how did it go, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done. 17, she said, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said, do not go to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Was this a sign of that he was including Ruth or he was including Naomi in the redemption, that he wanted her to be consoled and pacified? Probably it was. I can't think of anything else. He knows that Naomi has been the converting influence on Ruth, and he's just honoring, I think Boaz is honoring Naomi with a small token of food. Now, remember what we said about her being anxious when Boaz told her that there's going to be a closer kinsman? Look at Naomi's response in verse 18. And then she said, wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest until he has settled it today. When we find somebody waiting, they usually have some ability to not be too anxious. I find that to wait on the Lord is found 29 times in the New American Standard and 22 times in the NIV. And I think that's exactly what Ruth is, or what Naomi is telling Ruth here, is that just rest, just relax. Just wait this out. There's nothing else that you can do. It is now in God's hands. Now, You know, when we were about 25 minutes in, we were still on chapter 2, I had my doubts that we would get to the end of 3 today, but we have. And so I want to just tell you that next week, we'll talk quite a bit about the different types of redemption. There's that the kinsman redeemer can do and was set up for. It's not just to buy back land and to extend the family line. That's just one of them. And we'll look at the way that Naomi turns out and how the whole thing comes together for God's providential reasons to continue on with what he said he would do, which was to raise up a king. And it comes through the line of Judah. Thank you very much.